What I can say definitively is couples counseling does not work. It will not help if you are in a narcissistic relationship to have couples counseling. Unfortunately, we are not as a group educated very well in dealing with people with personality disorders or their partners. We usually focus on what's called a dance of equals. Unfortunately, this is an exception. You cannot put equal responsibility on partners in this type of a circumstance. It is not a dance of equals. A narcissist ultimately will never take accountability for things. Quite frankly, they often present as the perfect client. That's what makes it extra tricky for us as a group to identify, because they will say and do all the right things very deliberately.
Welcome back to Prey vs. Predator. We are thrilled to have with us as a guest today, Dr. Tamara Knott. Dr. Knott has just recently completed her PhD, and we're going to be talking about her dissertation, and she has uncovered just some fascinating material. But Dr. Tamara, tell us about yourself. We know something about you, but our listeners might not.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to be here. And I'm a registered clinical counselor. I've been in the field about a decade and a half now, working with clients. And so I primarily see adults, individuals, and couples. And a lot of my work, great deal of the focus is on interpersonal relationships. And this partially helped to generate this dissertation because I've had previous experience in my 20s with coming across the occasional narcissist. And I was noticing that every so often I was getting clients into my office who were all kind of reporting the same kinds of things in their partners and experiencing really high levels of distress and feeling really stuck about what to do next, like how to get out of the relationship or even if they should. And a lot of mental health issues were being created by that. And so when I started to do my dissertation research, what I found is there's actually not a lot of information out there about people who partner with narcissists. So I guess it's ironic that everybody's studying the narcissists themselves, but not the people who are super affected by the narcissist. And that felt very wrong as a counselor because narcissists are perfect. They don't come in for counseling. They don't need it. So who I was seeing was the partners, and they definitely needed the counseling and very little guidance out there, from a academic or formal kind of record perspective. Lots of anecdotal stuff, but not sort of formalized. So anyway, what I ended up doing with this research is I was looking at people's experience in a committed long-term relationship, so like 1 year plus. And it ended up ranging that I had people from 1 year to 36 years. So there was quite a stretch of different kinds of people who had partnered. Anyhow, so I was finding out about their experience. I was looking at their self-view over time and how that might have changed, and also what they kind of attributed the longevity of the relationships to, like what was going on there that would keep them in. Because a lot of people didn't want to be in it. They actually, some were making escape plans right from the first few months, in fact. Really? So it was an interesting dilemma.
That is a brilliant lead-in, I think, to our first kind of topic, which is, what do you think kept them in there?
So that is a lot of different factors, I think. There's one, I sort of separated it out into two concepts, because what I found is that there were some things that I would say were risk factors for drawing a person in the first place. And then there was the factors, those factors plus things that would keep them in the relationship long term. So, and in each of those two categories, I actually separated it into three separate items, which was like the first one being what was happening internally for the person who was partnering with the narcissist. So there's some inner things that were occurring that put them at risk. And then there was some external things that happened to them or were still happening that sort of drew them into this relationship. And then there was, of course, the narcissist characteristics themselves that would draw them in. And so that was sort of the three categories for the initial stages of the relationship. But then there was the longevity piece, which again separated it to three, like internal factors, external factors, but then the characteristics that the narcissist would now start to show in the relationship that kept them stuck in it as well. So that there's a lot of add-in kinds of things towards longevity.
What were those first things? Like, so we call these people, the partners, we call them prey. And we call this kind of coercive controller, we call them predators.
Yeah. And it very much is that kind of a relationship where there's strategy involved. And I think a normally, I should say, more typically wired person doesn't see a relationship as a game. It's not a chase catch kind of concept. It's let's create lives together. Let's enjoy ourselves. Let's participate together as a team, that sort of idea. So it's a very different mindset right from the outset. And I actually did have participants who described it like a predator prey kind of situation in hindsight. They didn't realize this right up front, obviously, right? So some of the things that I noticed, like if you want to, for instance, talk about the inner factors that a partner might have. And this actually goes contrary to the research that's been out there, by the way.
I'd love to hear it.
A lot of the research that's out there right now suggests that partners have characteristics that are similar to the narcissist. I found the opposite. And I think what the difference here is this is my research. My research is some of the first that actually sat down with people, didn't use sort of like the empirical quantifiable questions, but actually interviews and went deep into their lives. And a lot of previous research is done on university students who are transient relationships, that kind of thing. So this was different in a lot of ways. But anyways, I found that overall people were very high in empathy, agreeableness, caretaking personalities, generosity, flexibility, etc. And those are normally very pro-social kinds of pro-relationship kinds of qualities. Unfortunately, when you get to a narcissistic relationship, those are very much taken advantage of,
So
and there's not
weaponized.
reciprocity.
So I'm writing those down as you speak. Okay. But I only got three. I got empathy, agreeable, flexible. What were the other ones?
Caretaking personality and generosity. So
I mean, they sound so nice.
Were a lot of the sort of pro-social, pro-relationship kinds of things that I noticed about people that, like I said, was very contrary to existing research. And that was very much across the board, not just in my study, but also from what I experienced with counseling.
So you're saying that they got different results because their pool of who they're interviewing it was different from yours.
I think so. Yeah. A lot of these studies are typically done in a university setting, and, it's young people who don't have maybe long-term relationships in the moment. And, it's suggested by some research that when you get two narcissists in a relationship together, it explodes spectacularly. And that's not the kind of relationship I was looking at. I was looking at people who did go a bit at the distance and, who were putting in something that was allowing this relationship to be very committed and very long-term. And so there was other reasons that maybe I'd put in a different category from pro-relationship that I was finding as well that were internal factors. So like a really high comfort in allowing other people to take priority. So really kind of self-sacrificing. There was often like a belief system there, which could have been from like their culture or family system or religion, that you have to save your relationship at any cost.
That's right.
And so a lot of people went into these relationships just kind of thinking they had to make it work no matter what, and that there's something wrong with them if they didn't. And so that belief, I think, drew people in, looking for the best in others. So if there was a way to attribute, a behavior to something, like it could have been, you could have classified it as a negative behavior, you could classify it as positive. They had this tendency to classify it as, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt that you have best intentions here, which often is not the case with a narcissist. This one was a really interesting one. And this is what intrigued me the most, I would say, before I did my studies about what I was seeing commonly across the board. And this is people who are highly capable and status bound tended to be what I would call the victims of the predators. Because for a narcissist, they're looking for status, they're looking for arm candy, they're looking for people who they believe they deserve. And so they're focusing on these extrinsic kind of qualities and people who have resources, who have support and all this, and that seemed, like I said, to be very common across the board. So very different from domestic violence survivors, because that seems to be more diverse just in terms of who that happens to. So, as I say, I think the reason for that is because narcissists do pick a certain kind of person. They want that status. They want that success, that image, et cetera, et cetera. So that was very intriguing. And something that was sort of attached to that I also found interesting is that those people, those partners, were very humble about their successes and maybe didn't even recognize them for themselves. Like objectively, they were incredible people, but didn't seem to feel or believe or maybe fully understand that about themselves. And a person on the outside might go, wow, look at what you've done. And they might not necessarily have felt the same way about themselves, even if rationally they knew objectively it wasn't. I think it didn't translate maybe to the emotional space so much.
Yeah, we do mention that the people that are prey, and we want you to continue, so I'm not cutting you off, are wonderful. Like, we want people to know how wonderful prey are. And it's amazing that you're even, listing qualities that are amazing. And that these people, coercive controllers or narcissists, whatever you want to call them, predators, seek out those amazing qualities. Because we won't want people feeling shamed for having fell victim or even having been in a relationship, in the sense of those are beautiful qualities that the narcissist, the coercive controller, was drawn to you for those amazing qualities that you have. So thank you for listing those great things.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, and it's sad that, as I say, these pro-relationship qualities are so twisted, because some of my participants had mentioned to me, like, I maybe shouldn't be this way anymore. I maybe shouldn't be this giving or this caring or caretaking or whatever. And I think that's very sad, because there is research out there that shows that those qualities actually promote relationship satisfaction. They're not negative qualities. They were misused in the relationships. And that's not on that person. That's on the narcissist.
So here's like a chicken or egg question. Because I've heard this question a lot from people. Do you think that the prey are attracted to the predator, or do you think that the predator targets the prey? Like is it? Do you think it's like a mutual attraction, or is it a targeting? Like, what is your thoughts on it?
That's a very good question, because what happened in the initial stages of the relationships is a lot of partners did not like the narcissist at first. So they actually, especially I would say the grandiose subtype, because there's the research kind of suggests there's two types of narcissists. So the grandiose is somebody who you'd probably recognize, like they're out there, they're extroverted, they're, larger than life. But there's also the vulnerable subtype that, is maybe a little more introverted and quiet. But So these grandiose people can really turn people off. And so a fair number of participants did not start out wanting to be with that person, but it was actually an extreme persistence on the narcissist part that, and wore me down is a phrase that I heard a number of times. So I don't think that's the only explanation, because here's the other piece to this, which is narcissists are extraordinarily good at attracting people. So a lot of them have this high skill in being able to draw people in. Not all of them, but a lot of them really present a good image right up front. So they're very, very good at the initial stages of a relationship, and very, very poor at maintaining them. So they have special talents in that area. And so I would say, just in terms of that chicken and egg question, a lot of it, I think, is generated by the narcissist. Like, they do really target people. Absolutely. But there is an attractiveness factor there too. So there's a very rapid ease that they have in being able to make connections quickly and fast. So it's a little both, I guess, is the answer.
I'm curious. I don't know if I'm going to go off topic, so please rein me in. But socially, I think of all the movies that we've seen and about romance and the men pursuing and that. I think it would, if you are being pursued by somebody and you don't like them at first, but they keep coming back, in all our cultural kind of references with romance, that means they really like you. And it is kind of interesting. It kind of rings true to me. I'm thinking of all on my drive to this location, I kind of was thinking of all the movies I liked as a kid. And then it was like, oh, that person was a predator. Like, I was literally thinking about how, like, there's one I like, Mystic Pizza, where the girl ends up with, I think, the father of who she's babysitting. Like, it's disgusting. But I just think, so there is something in our culture. And then if you have somebody pursuing you, how attractive that is, weirdly enough. Because we're almost brainwashed to think that that's real love, or that's real affection, or that's sexy, or that's romantic. I don't know. So I'll give that back to you.
Yeah. I really do think that there is a cultural drive to, if somebody considers you attractive and is pursuing you like that, it's a massive compliment. It's a special feeling. And a number of my participants used the word chosen. That's a direct quote. They felt they were put on a pedestal by this person. And it's a very heady feeling. Like it's almost like a drug. Again, another quote. A bit of an adrenaline rush. And you don't get that in a normal relationship. It's not actually all that healthy to have this sense of worship, especially right up front when you don't know a person. It's insincere. And so, but exciting. And that, I think, is most certainly one of the narcissist skills. Like they know how to do the grand gestures. They know how to be romantic. Research demonstrates that they have a huge EQ when it comes to being able to figure out what is meaningful to a person, and they can use that. They play on that. A lot of them pretend to have the same value systems and worldview just to match their partner. The perfect partner is the word that comes to mind when I think about that. They present themselves that way, and it's the perfect partner for that person. It's like they curate their mask, especially for you, and they're very good at it. And so if you're on the other side of that, and this person probably seems like a dream, just like somebody who, wow, this is my mental checklist that I have. They're ticking all the boxes. I'm so excited. They're saying and doing all the right things. But, it gets pretty surprising when that starts to turn. They can see below the surface a little.
So talk to us about the turn.
Okay.
You know, often we'll hear a relationship as a dance.
Yeah.
But there comes a time when one of the partners becomes aware that I am not in a relationship with an equal. Like there is a power imbalance there. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So that happens as soon as the narcissist sees that or senses that their partner is committed. So, you know, as I said, they have this real skill in meshing you very quickly into the relationship. And so the level of commitment happens fast. And so it could look like just an intensity. It could look like introducing to family early or moving in, having a child, you know, a lot of different things. But once they have that sense that the person is committed, the mask starts to fall away because, you know, that's a lot of effort, first of all, to be somebody you're not. Yeah, but also it's not genuine. So, you know, the narcissist starts by testing a bit to see, okay, where are the boundaries here? How much am I going to be able to get away with? And how little do I have to do to actually maintain this relationship? And so it's the sort of, after the initial honeymoon phase, there's this kind of pushing of those boundaries and, you know, poking a little bit to see how much they can get away with. And that actually happens really early on. People do notice red flags, but because this person is so wonderful, they've shown so many good qualities. There's, you know, the personal justifications and excuses that go on to sort of say, oh, well, you know, I didn't like that maybe, but, you know, overall, this person's so fabulous. And so that's how boundaries start to get pushed. It's beginning by starting those justifications. And people are very confused at this stage because this is bizarre. I don't know this person to be this way. And so it's hard to make sense of in the moment. Like, how do you kind of put that into the puzzle piece? It's very difficult to make sense of.
I like the fact that you use the word confused because I think we've used that term before in relationship, even as children of these sort of people. There is a sense of just overwhelming confusion all the time and not knowing where to kind of land or kind of being in this place of not knowing what's going to happen next. So it's interesting that that's used as a tool, I guess, is what you're saying, by the coercive controller, the predator, to keep the person off balance and to push boundaries, I'm hearing. Is that a good summary of it?
I actually do think that that's the goal of the control. So I think that when you say it's the tool, I actually think that's the primary reason for all of it is I'm going to keep you unbalanced so that I can do what I want. And all of that is to do with control, power and control. And, you know, again, research does show that control obviously is a very big, with anybody with a personality disorder, it's a big need. It's a big goal. Partly because people with personality disorders and narcissists specifically sort of subscribe to this zero-sum game kind of idea, which both people can't profit. One has to be better to profit over the other. So, you know, in a partnership, in a relationship, you want both people to be built up and happy and thriving, et cetera. A narcissist will feel like you need to be below me so I can be up.
Oh, yeah.
and so that they're sort of every motivation for doing what they do in these relationships that sort of exist in the negative behavior space, I think comes from that. You know, I'm going to push you down so I can do better.
Yeah.
I have so many good quotes I'm writing down here. I'm just envisioning like all these quotes getting getting set up here. It's interesting because you said you're a counselor, and I'm wondering from your experience with counseling through the people that you worked with and interviewed, how does this work therapeutically? Like when these people come into your office, or what did you notice about the people that you interviewed?
Yeah. What I can say definitively is couples counseling does not work. It will not help if you are in a narcissistic relationship to have couples counseling. And unfortunately, we are not as a group educated very well in dealing with people with personality disorders or their partners. We usually focus on what's called a dance of equals. And you mentioned that.
Well, there's a whole series of books, right?
Yeah,
the dance of fear, the dance of whatever, and anger.
Unfortunately, this is an exception. You cannot put equal responsibility on partners in this type of a circumstance. It is not a dance of equals. One person does not have the power in the relationship to take on the responsibility for the negative things that are happening. I mean, there may be, of course, there's always changes anybody can make, but a narcissist ultimately will never take accountability for things, ultimately does not want to change. They will pretend to. And quite frankly, they often present as the perfect client. So that's what makes it extra tricky for us as a group to identify, because they will say and do all the right things very deliberately.
Do you think they weaponize therapy? Like, because weaponizing therapy, because sometimes I've wondered that if there's narcissists or people out there who go to therapy, don't really learn much, but they learn all the tools so they can use it as a weapon against the prey in their life.
That's actually it's a very important question, because one thing I do want to put out there is that in couples counseling, a narcissist will use what the counselor says against their partner at home.
Yeah.
So that is part of the abuse and can be actually more destructive, I think, than helpful. And so I really do think that it is a counselor's responsibility, if they're getting a hint that something like this is going on, that they either educate themselves or refer, because it should not be a couples counseling setting. I highly recommend to people, just like in a domestic violence situation where there is physical battering, that you do not see couples together. It should be on an individual basis. And that actually is where my participants said that they did get help. So once a counselor was either able to identify and label with them what was going on, or they got individual counseling, that's where healing started to begin. So what I would suggest to counselors is there is certain things they should look for, and maybe not look for it in the narcissistic person's behaviors, because as I say, they're performing, they're being the perfect client, but looking at partners and their cluster of behaviors, because there are a certain set of things that I would say people report. So the first thing that I would say that people should look for, counselors should look for in their clients, is like a sense of exhaustion or drainedness. Like they don't have a loud voice in the relationship. Really kind of readily accepting blame and allowing their partner's narrative to kind of take a lot of space. One thing you can notice, I think, about the narcissist is they will spend a fair bit of time, usually letting you know how great they are. And they won't say it like that. It'll be, yeah, when I did this thing for the relationship, or when I did this thing out in the community, they'll make sure to kind of insert information to show, hey, look at me, I'm wonderful. I do all those things. And so you are sort of looking for that energy plus the partner's energy, which is, I'll accept what you're saying. Your narrative is loud. It gets to take space. So paying attention to the client's personal boundaries, for example, like have they shifted? I actually have a set of questions that I would suggest counselors ask if they're
Oh,
suspecting.
tell us.
Yes,
Tell us.
Tell us.
So I would say there's kind of three things. How would you describe yourself before the relationship?
Interesting.
Because I think it's really, really important to get the comparison to now. Like what has maybe degraded over time, like self-esteem or sense of self, activities you do for yourself, that kind of thing. Second one is what do you think has changed about you? So that's how you get that contrast. You figure that out. And why do you think that's changed? And that one can bear a lot of fruit. So when people start to talk about the whys of things, that's when I think a lot of the background truth starts to come out. And that's also why I think it's really important to then separate these clients into individual sessions, because the partner's going to be feeling like they're walking on eggshells, like their partner's a time bomb. Time bomb is a quote from a number of my participants too. So weirdly, that same quote came out across a number of people. People also feel shame about being in a relationship like this. Like, why have I stayed? I'm listing all these conditions that really suck, and I'm still there. And so people are afraid to talk about that. They're also made to feel like all of this is their fault too. So shame comes from that as well. And so the counselor should be looking at, how is this person responding? Is there mental health issues that have happened now in the course of the relationship, like anxiety, panic, depression, etc., that weren't there before? One key thing, this is really important, is the cyclical patterns too. So cyclical patterns can happen in regular relationships, but they're very profound in dysfunctional relationships. So you'll see this in, again, domestic abuse situations of all kinds. But there's this great season of like wooing or re-wooing. And then things start to degrade and the bad times happen. There's often blow-ups and things like that. And then this great season of re-wooing again. And so it continues and it continues. So there's a lot of gaps between good times and bad times. I think that should be a key word for counselors, is when we're really good, we're really good. When we're bad, we're really bad. If you hear that, that's a big warning sign.
Yeah.
That's something to dig into.
I'm curious. First of all, I love the fact that you're looking at a couple and you're therapeutically asking the person who is potentially partnered with a narcissist. Like you're looking for signs through them, because you're right. Most people focus on the narcissist or focused on that person. So it is very interesting. And it's moving to me because it's giving voice to somebody who's obviously had their voice taken. The second thing, I'm just curious, when you first meet these people, or you're just trying to figure this out, is there like a pattern where maybe the person who is the coercive controller, the predator, throws the other person under the bus right away, and the other person, do they not? Do they throw themselves under the bus? I'm just curious, who do they blame for the relationship at first? Are they?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think you described that perfectly. The throwing under the bus won't be obvious, though.
Okay.
So it'll be a very subtle way of speaking, so that it doesn't seem like they're throwing their partner under the bus.
Okay.
But yes, I think that dichotomy exists, and it does happen pretty quickly on too. So, usually if somebody is, if you see that contrast where somebody does not seem to focus on themselves as a role or as a problem, versus somebody who is willing to take on that mantle, that's right up front. That does absolutely happen. And I think what's most telling about that too is, you can also ask a question about, okay, what did you talk about after our session? because I think that gives a lot of information about what happens truly in the relationship. Because typically what occurs is the narcissist will go home and say, oh, here's all the reasons the counselor told you were the problem. And here's why you need to change. And so that's like ding, 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 ding. If you hear that information as a counselor after a first session, that is really big news for being able to determine if you have this unbalanced kind of relationship, the predator-prey kind of thing going on. Now, unfortunately, this is a challenge for a counselor, is that you can't actually push the narcissist too hard, because if you challenge them in a way that they don't like, they will not come back, and they might not allow their partner to either. So it's a bit of a tightrope, because narcissists will do what we call therapist shopping to find somebody who lets them get away with stuff. And so as a counselor, it's really tricky. You've got to, because the first few sessions, you do need to gather information. And so you want the narcissist to at least attend those individual sessions I was talking about, so you can get a full picture. But what I end up doing is kind of see that as eventually just I'm not going to be able to affect change with this narcissistic person, but I can affect change with the partner. And I'll get very honest and blunt with them at that point.
With the partner, but not the narcissist.
Yeah, exactly.
So what does the partner typically say when you're able to present to them that you are of value and you have a voice?
It is a bit of a revelation.
Yeah,
I would say.
I would think.
It's like something has unlocked or opened up. And, sometimes you can say it a few times and it doesn't penetrate, right? Like I always say there's a difference between the head space and the heart space. Like you can rationally know something, but not feel it necessarily.
Totally. It's like that Teflon.
A lot of my work is around getting that headspace knowledge into the heart space too.
Yeah.
And the penny really drops when you start labeling stuff. So even just how I first suggested, I'll tell you what I do here is I usually say to the person, I've just noticed some things, and I thought it might be interesting for you to go home today and just look up the term narcissist and, look up more of the medical side of things, look up, the diagnostic side of things and see what you think about that. And I just leave it there. And then we start more labeling later. So like certain behaviors like gaslighting, manipulation, control, coercive control, that kind of thing. And once we start doing that, the penny drops for sure. That's when people really click into, wow, okay, it's not me.
Yeah, I mean, that is really the heart of why we do prey versus predator, because the real heart is getting that language into people's hand changes the game.
Yeah.
Because you can't see, you can't see what you can't see. You don't know what you don't know. And so you can feel as crazy as anything, but if every single book you turn to, like for marriage therapy or something says, it's a dance, you can fix it without talking about it.
Yeah.
You can you can own your part, take some responsibility. It's pretty across the board. I have yet to see that marriage counseling book that has that chapter, which I call the missing first chapter, which says, if you see these behaviors in your relationship, please don't read this book. It's not for you.
Yeah.
It's
interesting you say that, because you've almost quoted one of my participants verbatim.
Oh, really?
Perfect.
That is really, I think, the sentiment that the language matters so much in terms of being able to make sense of things, and that the typical counseling strategies are not applicable. So we do need more emphasis on these exceptions to the rule, where regular counseling strategies have to be thrown out the window completely. And, quite frankly, as I say, I think it is all about counseling the individual, like reimagining that focus from couples counseling into let's get you feeling well and whole and making decisions from a place of clarity. And that at the end of the day, I think is the most important thing.
This is great because I think this is a perfect place for us to lead into our next episode with you. So I'd ask everybody to come back for episode 2 with Dr. Tamara Knott. It's been amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So good.
I have so many notes written down.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamara.